If you have a Bible and you find it helpful, please turn in it to Luke chapter 1. This is where we'll spend our time. Luke's gospel is unique among all four of them. Of course, John's gospel is quite unique. Luke is, as you know, one of the three synoptic gospels. That is, the gospels that most closely just summarize the history of the biography of Jesus of Nazareth. But Luke's gospel is the most detailed. He gives us about 30% more information regarding Jesus historically than either Matthew or Mark. And what's interesting about Luke's gospel is, first of all, he's not a Jew. Luke is a Gentile. And the second is he's not an eyewitness. He has, as Mark did, John and Matthew were eyewitnesses, but Luke has just interviewed eyewitnesses early on in his life to compose this gospel. So let's take a look at the text. It'll be Luke chapter 1, and I'll begin reading in verse 1. Many have undertaken to give an account of the things that have been fulfilled among us, like the accounts passed on to us by those who were eyewitnesses and servants of the word from the beginning. So it seemed good to me as well, because I followed all these things carefully from the beginning, to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus, so that you may know for certain the things that you've been taught. Luke begins by, and this is very common in ancient biography, explaining what he's going to do. He just explains to Theophilus that he's going to write this very orderly account. It's important for him for reasons that only Luke really knows why it is he wanted to do this. Theophilus is an interesting name. It literally means Theophileo, that is, God's lover. That's what it means. And it's a person's name. We don't know anything about Theophilus. Some people think that he was a wealthy patron who had become a Christian that Luke was aware of and was a friend of. Luke, being a Gentile and writing his gospel as a Gentile, none of the Gospels talk about what happened in Jerusalem beginning in 66 AD. And so I'm going to say all of the Gospels. Now, there are huge controversies about this, the dating of the four Gospels. There are people who hold John's Gospel to have been written as late as 90 AD. I do not think that's true. I think all these Gospels were written prior to 66, and the reason I say that is 3 of the 4 of them are Jewish. And there is no way that they would have left out the Jewish wars had they written these Gospels after the wars, which is 70 AD is when they ended. Think about it from the standpoint of, let's say somebody wrote a biography of Rudy Giuliani when he was mayor in New York. Do you think they'd have left 9/11 out? I don't think so. So that tells me that these Gospels are earlier than most people would say that they are today. Luke has probably seen Mark's account, may have seen Matthew's account. He's obviously talked to some of the same people, and he has come up with this very detailed account where he pegs everything to a date, to various rulers. I mean, all of this is so detailed. There are people who are historians of the ancient Roman Empire who say Luke's account, between Luke's Gospel and Luke Acts, it's the most detailed account of that ancient world that we've got. I would say they're probably right. He records what is obviously eyewitness testimony. These people that he's interviewed were there when these things happened. They heard it said, they heard Jesus speak, they saw the crucifixion, some of them were witnesses to the resurrection. And so Luke is just really recording what people actually saw. Now Luke is very humble. And the reason I know that is he remains in the background of both Luke and the Acts. You don't see Luke mentioning himself. The closest you come to it, and I think this is fascinating, if you read the book of Acts, you come to a certain point where it no longer says they, it says we. And that's where Luke is traveling with Paul. So it's very interesting to me. He was probably with Paul right to the date that Paul was to be executed in Rome. And that's, if you want to read about that, 2 Timothy chapter 4 gives you the details there. He seems that it's important. He deems it important to himself to give this orderly account. And he says to Theophilus that you'll be certain about that which you've been instructed. And I thought, wow, isn't that what a modern way to look at this. I mean, here we are at this point in our history in the 21st century. And I could be wrong about this, but most believers who attend church, they aren't terribly instructed about these things. It's a shame, but that's the truth. When people get born again, they bring everything of them that they know of themselves to everything they know about Jesus, and we get born again, right? We don't know anything about much of the history. We don't know anything much about what Paul said, but we're supposed to not just stay there forever. We're supposed to start to gain some of that knowledge over time. So much of the gospel and the teachings therein, they remain just a faith point for people. That people just believe it, and that's it. But man, it doesn't take very long, especially in this culture today, that questions are going to come up. Not only from the outside, but even inside. They came up for me on the inside. And I wasn't going to be satisfied to just believe something myself. I had to know at least that I could believe it. It's very important. And a lot of people at Christmas, that's the sentimental pieces of this, the sentimental aspects of it that Ed pointed to when we were talking a few minutes ago. For a lot of people, that's where they stop. That's the whole thing. The whole show is just sentimental. I don't even understand that. How can you be sentimental about something if it's not even real? I mean, Becky and I watch movies, and I might watch a movie and it chokes me up, but I don't come away from it choked up and then think that anything in there is real. It's a story. It's no accident, I don't think, that in our culture right now, churches are emptying. Because how can you make people hold on to something that's not even real? Let me ask you a question. And think, you don't have to raise your hand or anything, but think about this. Could you remain a believer if you found out for absolute certainty that none of this was real? I couldn't. I couldn't believe it if I didn't find enough evidence to tell me that it is real, it is believable. So a person comes to a place, and this happens a lot, especially in youth. They come to a place, they go through high school, some of the things in high school begin to challenge some of the things they find in the Bible. Then they go to college, and they find even more challenges. And if they haven't been taught in the church, when they come to those places, they don't have anything to step back upon and then recover from the challenges. That's just so important. I'll never forget being in Kansas. I can see it. Standing at the gas pump in Kansas, filling up our vehicle, and looking down on the ground and seeing a piece of paper, which I bent down and picked up. Becky would have been mortified, because who handled that thing? And I picked it up, and it was a tract. And I read it, and I thought, this makes a ton of sense. And it was from the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Jehovah's Witnesses. I knew they were wrong, but I didn't have a clue where or why. So think about somebody who goes through their life, they go through youth group, they go through church, they live at the church, they are engaged in all the activities, and then they get to be 18, 19, 20 years old, and they've never been grounded in anything that tells them that this is a history that can be believed and relied upon. Where are they going to go? They're just going to leave. And 80% of those who graduate high school and go to college never come back. That's a lot. It's no accident that every year, and I didn't notice this actually until about 10 years ago. I don't know why, but every year, this time of the year, on most any of the cable channels that do documentaries, you will find documentaries about Jesus at Christmas every year. And they've always got some kind of, I guess they would call it new or novel information that nobody's ever thought of before. And so they line up all of these mostly unbelieving scholars, and some of them are scholars. I know who they are. I've read their writings. And they'll go through an hour-long documentary and chop out every one of the historical foundations for the gospel until the last of the show, when they'll say something sentimental about it so that they don't tear the whole thing down, and that's where they leave us, is with the sentimental. Why do they do that? Why would anybody think it important to do that? You know, I've said this for all my life as a Christian, and it's absolutely true, and you can bank on it. You tell me what you think of Jesus, and I know what you are. Without any doubt. You tell me what you think of Jesus, and I know what you are. So what are they doing? They're undermining the confidence in the gospel. I mean, if you can get... Did you know the Jesus Seminar? That sounds very good, doesn't it? Sounds orthodox. It's a bunch of scholars, about 70 or so. They throw beads in a hat, different colored beads, and they vote on which things in the Gospels Jesus actually said and which things he actually did. And right now, as it stands, they hold that only 15% of what he said is what he said, and even less than what he did is what he did. Now, how can anybody read Luke's Gospel with that mindset and come away from it and say, I want to become a follower of Jesus? Secondly, they diminish all the history and turn it into that which is nothing but a matter of faith. You can believe it, but it's good to believe certain things. It'll make your life better if you believe it, and then leave us with the emphasis on the sentimental. And at Advent every year, it seems to me the sentimental is where we get left. A lot of people, think about it for a moment, how do people come to a service at Christmas? I did this. When I was a kid at First Baptist Church, they had every year a Christmas Eve service, and I liked it. I didn't believe any of it. My parents weren't believers, but I liked it because you could go there, the big organ and the piano and a lot of people, and sing Christmas songs for an hour. That's what the service was. There's no sermon. You just go in there, stand up, and the music leader comes up and leads us in Christmas songs for an hour. I used to love that. And I walked out of there just as unbelieving as I walked in. And if the sentimental is all there is, that's not hard to do. Walk in unbelieving, look at the sentimental aspects of Christmas, and then walk out just as unbelieving as one walked in. See, a person can do their bit at Christmas, and lots of people do. We used to joke about it when we traveled together as the band. We used to, this is not my line, I wish I'd have made it up, but it was the drummer. He said, yeah, they're the hollies and the lilies. The hollies that come only at Christmas, and then the lilies come at Easter, and that's the only 2 times of the year that they ever show up in a church. And a person can do that. They can participate, they can sing, they can maybe put some money in, and come away feeling like they've done something, you know, that's religiously significant somehow and very sentimentally attractive. But if it's not real, if this stuff didn't happen, what are we even doing here? See, the power of Luke's gospel is in its reality. It's in its historicity. Luke's orderly account forces a person, if they're going to take it seriously, to a point of saying, I'm either going to believe it or not. There's a raw edge there. You don't have a choice about it. And if a person just focuses on the sentimental and walks away unbelieving, they've made their choice. There's a lot of instruction in Luke's gospel. And if a person takes it seriously as an historical investigation, they're forced to something. It's that you've got an objective history which makes you have to make a decision. And then you can have the sentimentality and all the beauty of Christmas and the fellowship and the lights and the trees and the food and the family and all of that. It becomes significant, but it becomes significant for a very different reason. Because the subjective now is undergirded by the objective. What we feel is undergirded by what's true. So, where are you and I on this journey? Or are we still at that beginning where it's just faith? We've just believed something. Unchallenged and therefore unreinforced. I hope not in this church. I hope not. I hope here that we've emphasized learning enough so that nobody's caught up like that. So is it any wonder that at Christmas people can hear the Christmas story, read Luke 2, hear the whole thing, see Linus reciting it on the Charlie Brown Christmas. The whole thing, he recites the whole thing. Get blubbery like a schoolgirl, misty-eyed and everything else, and then walk away from it just thinking it's all a matter of nothing but faith because none of it's real. It's easy to do. People come into churches every year. They walk in, they participate, and they walk out because real life is what waits for them out there, not in here. But if the gospel is history, then it changes everything. Everything. Or it should. I don't know where everybody is today, but